Resources Extension Education Foundation. This organization was formed from the NREEF board in order to generate funds to support natural resource extension education. We are a charitable organization. We can accept donations from individuals and corporations, providing a tax receipt for that current year. We can also accept donations from foundations and nonprofit organizations. We have a board of trustees of 9 members and 2 affiliate members. Not all of these positions are filled. So if you are interested in serving on the board, I would very much like hearing from you. My email is on the website for the NREEF.org. Let's get on with our conversation with Chuck Gay now. Chuck is a longtime extension professional. He began his career as the first range specialist with New Mexico State University. He has worldwide experience working in the livestock industry. And later he moved on to serve as the assistant dean for the College of Natural Resources at Utah State University and retired from Utah State University as Associate Vice President for Extension. Chuck, I'm very glad to have you here today. You've had a long and successful career. What were some of the formative events in your journey?
Well, there are 3 sort of major events that were turning points in my life. I was I was in engineering school at the University of Oklahoma, and I didn't like it very much. And I was actually in up in Taos, New Mexico, trying to become an artist, and ran into a couple of New Mexico State forest rangers and got to talking to them. And I was a kid that grew up running in the woods almost every day because they were right across the street from where we lived. And they kind of inspired me. So I changed my major and went from OU to Oklahoma State in forestry. That was the first major change. And then the second was my range management professor in my curricula there was an inspiring gentleman. And I became kind of an assistant in a number of his classes after I had taken them. And then he was able to get me a scholarship from Phillips Petroleum so that I could go to graduate school. And he became my major professor and kind of my mentor. And through him, that was how I made the connection with New Mexico State. And so I was, and then the sort of the third thing that happened that was that at New Mexico State, they had a livestock development and a project with USAID, and it also involved development of the agriculture and veterinarian college there. And they asked me if I would like to go. They had a position for a ranger guy, and I did. And 7 months into the job, we were going to be there for 2 years with my family. And 7 months into the job, the gentleman who was chief of party went back to the university because he had been there for a long time. And I became the chief of party. I became the administrator for the project. And that sort of got me into another phase of administration within the university. And so I think those were probably the big three. It wasn't a turning point, but I just have to mention, Eric, when you and I and many of our colleagues got snowed in Denver for for 4 days, closed the airports, the whole city closed down. That was one of the greatest experiments and enjoyable times of my career, with all of our natural resources colleagues in a hotel where we couldn't leave. And yeah, it was really something.
How did you get involved with NREEF, Chuck?
Well, I was very involved with the Society for Range Management and Society of American.
You said you do?
Foresters. And
Want some?
pardon?
For those in the audience, please mute your mics until the end of the webinar, and we'll take questions.
Oh
and
yeah, so
answers.
sorry about that.
So anyway, in the Society of American Foresters, I was chair of the range committee at the time, but I was going to the meetings with the forestry group, and there I met guys like Don Hanley and Bill Hubbard, and through Bill I got to know Joe Schaefer, and we started talking about creating a organization sort of like NREEF, and before long, there it was. And so I've just tried to be a supporter ever since.
Well, you were more than a supporter. You eventually became the 6th president for NREEF. I think you're I think you are very involved with NREEF activities.
Yeah, it was a good time.
What are some of the significant changes that you've witnessed in natural resource extension during your career?
Well, I think because we're all attached to State University, I think one of the big things that I've seen is in many universities, in most universities, is that we have become faculty rather than extension staff. And I think that has had a big impact, because that means that we have the role statements and other kinds of criteria by which we are judged, and just like all faculty within the university. And that sort of changes the game in a way, because I think one of the significant things about extension is that we tend to work in teams, and we work well in teams because we're looking at large community-based kinds of and very significant kinds of issues, and yet we are judged as individuals. And I think that is for me, that has had I've seen a significant change in how we operate as professionals. I think you're muted, John.
Is there anything thank you for telling me that. Is there anything as we move forward that you would like to have held on to with regard to the past?
Oh, well, I can't really think of anything that certainly when we were sort of a wing of the university rather than faculty, I think there was probably more camaraderie within the organization, than now, because and for one thing is that we've also we're now distributed in most universities. We're distributed through many of the colleges, if not all, on the campus. And so our campus people are all report to department heads and deans, and with a partial extension appointment. And so I think some of that has been lost.
That's very true. I noticed that in my own career at Mississippi State University. I guess one of the fortunate things there is that we worked as a team very well in extension forestry. There at Mississippi State, we had both professionals on campus and faculty off campus. I was wondering, as you think about where extension is going, and particularly in natural resources, what are some of the issues that you see looming, either that we're dealing with now or on the horizon, that we're going to have to deal with?
Well, I think you could just look at the issues that drove the election yesterday. That's what's in the minds of people, and that's what's driving the worries, the issues, the problems that our public are facing. And I think Extension is one of those beautiful organizations that's organized extremely well to help those things. Financial security, food security, child care, family issues, climate change. I think that whole package that were on the agenda yesterday, that's what's on the agenda of the public we serve.
That's a very good point. It covers a wide gamut and many disciplines as to what concerns people. It's not just environmental anymore, but there's a good deal of social aspects to that. How do you think these changes are going to affect the way natural resource extension professionals will be working?
Well, it's what I worry about is, I touched on it earlier. I worry about the fact that as in our professional careers now, as we are judged by the university system as individuals, these big issues like this require teams of people that can bring elements of expertise to bear on the various issues. It isn't just one specialist or the agents in the county or whatever that to step up and put a program together that's going to have statewide or maybe even regional wide significance. And I think we've got to figure out a way that we can be fairly judged, but be able to come together to do our job, to face these these enormous issues in the country.
Right. That's certainly a good point about the way we administer programs. How do you evaluate them when they're more team-based than just solely on individual effort? Yes, that's a really good point. We certainly have awards, professional awards through various professional organizations that can address that sort of thing. But when you get right down to the brass tacks of your job and your paycheck,
yeah,
it's a different issue. Yeah, certainly. What advice would you offer new and developing extension professionals in advancing their careers nowadays?
Train your administrators. Because often the people who are administering programs came to become administrators through a research appointment.
Mhm.
And so I think it's really and you know it's easy to do. I I've been involved in the state politics and the regional politics. For 20 years, I represented the university with the Western Governors Association and attended all of their meetings. And it was fabulous because when I left those meetings, I knew exactly where the Western states as a unit were headed, and could come back and often it was not just for extension, but for our academic departments with a heads up of where they could find leverage. And and then for about that same period of time, I was meeting with our congressional delegation 2 or 3 times a year, and developed good friendships and really a lot of support. Well, not everybody's going to be able to do that, but your state legislatures, who certainly have not given up the reins of control of state universities, live in your counties, and those relationships are critical, you know. And people say, well, I'm not political. Well, everything's political. If you're married, you're political. If you have children, you're political. And you just have to, you've got to make those associations, because they're the ones that are driving your car. And if they believe in you, then they'll believe in supporting your programs. I think you're back on mute again, John.
You're right. That's an excellent point. Too often we get tied up in our own little world of what we're doing, and we forget about the fact that it also depends on how we're affecting the clientele that we serve and the people that represent them at different levels of government, right?
That's true. And often, we have to train our legislators as well, because so often they have no idea who we are or what we do. And as public servants themselves, their door is open. And so
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways that is easy to do it, because of course universities get very nervous, university administrations get very nervous when we go out and start talking to state legislators. We serve a county board. That county board is connected to the politics of that county and the state and the elected officials, and through them you can make those connections really easy.
Right, right.
So John, we have 2 questions in the chat box for Chuck. The
Let's
first one
move on to that.
The first one is, Chuck, can you share more about your career as a range specialist? What did that entail? And then I'll let you answer that. And then Luke has a question for you as well.
Sure. Well, since there had been no range specialist at New Mexico, there was very little extension related literature when I arrived. And so one of the things that happened, I'll have to say that this probably was another one of those significant moments. I had not been at New Mexico State, I don't know, few weeks, and you know, at the time, I was 27 years old and green as a gourd. And I was trying to sort of get myself organized and everything. And so in the agriculture building, we had a coffee shop. I went down to the coffee shop and sat down, was invited to sit down with some of the old guard. And there was a gentleman at the table by the name of Dick Stoddard. He was the sheep and wool marketing specialist and had been for years. And we began to talk, and he asked, he said, well, how are you doing? And what are you doing? And I gave him a rundown of a bunch of superfluous things that I was trying to get going. And he kind of reared back and looked at me sort of down his nose, and he said, son, you don't know crap. I mean, that's not what he said, but I'll clean it up. And I was kind of shocked. And he said, for the next 6 months, you're going to go with me every place I go and everything I do. And I'm going to introduce you to the right people out in the livestock community. And that's what he did. And that was the thing that made all the difference in the world. And when we got finished with that 6 months, I had a clientele, and people knew who I was and what I was doing. And I started getting lots of calls. And then I started putting together, I wrote the range plants of New Mexico. I wrote poisonous plants of New Mexico. I wrote range management for 4-H and FFA kids. Just a whole series of things. And those were popular, and it took off from there. And then of course, then going overseas made a difference. And once you take an international position, you become sort of a part of a club, and people call. And so I continue to get lots of calls, particularly to do a lot of short-term kinds of work. And then Utah State, they were the ones that called and asked if I would be interested in a project that they had in North Africa, in Morocco, back in 1983. And I was in a situation where I was actually thinking about getting back into international programs, and that's how I came to Utah State.
Thank you, Chuck. Luke, do you want to unmute and ask your question? It looks like you're in your car. If not, I can ask it for you.
Yeah, I can ask it. It's in the chat. I was drafting another question, but the first one is, what program did you implement that you felt like had the biggest impact? And can you describe it? Like, what are the characteristics? It sounds like teams might be a piece of that, but I'd be curious to hear what kind of program you thought made the biggest difference in your career.
Well, in New Mexico, I think the program associated with poisonous plant problems, because the arid West has there's a whole list of plant materials that grow naturally in the West that are poisonous to livestock. And in New Mexico, there were a number. And working with livestock producers on how to avoid those, how to recognize those issues, and how to avoid those had a huge, had a big economic impact. And I think probably when I was at New Mexico, that was it. And then in I have at Utah State, I did not work in the field as a specialist here, but I think coordinating with all of our extension employees and helping develop their professionalism and creating opportunities for them to participate in professional development activities. I think that was significant, and I saw a big move forward in our ability to serve our clientele.
Can you describe a little bit of the characteristics of the program? Like, whereas they're like I'm doing a train the trainer, like a volunteer training program. You know, I had programs like publishing, like fact sheets. There's, you know, websites, social media. There's all these different types of programs. I was curious if you had, like, what parts of the poisonous plant program was the publication, or other aspects?
Well, the publication was kind of served a basic need. I mean, it gave them something in hand that they could go to, because of course there are beautiful bound books of many on poisonous plants, but they're I mean, they're like the Webster's dictionary, you know, and so putting something that was useful in the hands of the livestock producers in our state, that they could relate to, that it was where things were easy to find, they could quickly identify the plants and the situation, and then backing those up with a lot of training and training of our agents as well. A lot of our agricultural agents at that time, they were not particularly well trained. They did not understand a lot of the things that we were looking at.
Chuck, I'll jump in with a question here. Ramona told me to go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm not sure quite how to word this, but I understand that you're close to retirement or retiring. I think.
Oh, I retired, yeah.
You retired
2013.
2013. Oh my goodness. Well, you still speak as if you're still involved. And so I wanted to ask you, what does a great retirement look like after you've been in natural resources extension?
Oh, well, I tell you what I did. At first, I have to tell you that my career lasted 54 years, and I retired at 76. And there's no mandatory retirement, and the university upper administration was going through changes, and so every time that I had a retirement plan that took me 5 years to implement, because they kept saying, no, you have to stay another year. Well, I didn't have anything else to do, so why not? So and I was having a good time, so I did that. And but then when I retired, I signed on because I had developed these relationships, I had signed on as a carrot rep. And so for 10 more years, I continued to go to Washington and represent the university as a Council of Ag Research, Extension, and Teaching, which is a advisory, kind of an advisory, but more of an advocacy group of people, primarily people from our clientele who are influential and have relationships with our congressional delegations. And it's a way of preserving and augmenting our federal lines. Eric knows about this well and knows what the carrot groups do. And so that kept me involved and connected.
Mhm. Thank you.
Chuck, thank you so much for sharing about your career and your insights. And we're so very glad to have you serving on our board. And if you did not get to ask a question of Chuck today, you can always contact him by email, which is listed on the NREEF website. So
Yeah.
thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I
This
could
is
just give you I'll give you my email. It's chuck.gay@usu.edu.
So thank you for attending, everyone, and we'll move on into our Board of Trustees meeting.
Yeah, thanks. I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.